This is the case against affirmative action, as presented by Heather Delancey, Caitlin Rosane, and Kylie Poznansky. To begin, let's define those who are affected by affirmative action. Governmental contractors and subcontractors, private employers who receive federal funds, public companies and universities who receive government funds and contracts. Who is not affected by affirmative action? Private employers who receive no public funding, and those with fewer than 15 employees. In short, affirmative action prioritizes the placement of underrepresented groups and sectors from which they were categorically excluded in the past, including the workplace and the academy. In our case against affirmative action, the following items, with all supporting documentation, will be discussed at length. Reverse discrimination, lowered accountability standards for college-bound applicants, the failure to ensure a colorblind society, condescending nature of the law, and the demeaning nature of affirmative action on minority achievement. This statement is designed to end discrimination and unfair treatment of employees and students based on color and sex. Affirmative action has since had the equal and opposite effect on non-minority groups such as white men. Colleges receiving public funding must act in accordance with affirmative action laws, which do not give advantages to applicants based on race or ethnicity, but do allow universities to consider race on a case-by-case basis for admission assessment. If our nation's goal was to help those abused by years of oppression during periods of slavery and segregation, then the mechanism has failed. A Harvard study found in 2012 that estimated 2/3 of minority students come from families which hail from the Caribbean or Africa. Therefore, Black Americans who have resided in this country for generations, the ones whose ancestors endured slavery, segregation, and other barriers, aren't reaping the benefits of affirmative action. Although quotas are frowned upon at the federal level, Washington is among a number of states that give added credit in the admissions process to students who come from poor families or attend troubled schools and are considered a minority race.
Proponents of affirmative action have called the law reverse discrimination for decades. In 1973 and 1974, Alan Bach was twice denied admission to the University of California Medical School at Davis. When Bach's case was heard in the Supreme Court, it was determined that the University of California had reserved 16 positions for every 100 admissions for qualifying minorities. It was also established that Bach's GPA and test scores exceeding those of the minorities admitted through this process. Although the court reached to a 5-4 verdict in favor of Bach, requiring the University of California to admit him, 4 justices stated that the use of race as an admission criteria was constitutionally permissible. Constitutionally permissible? How is this so? Under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, states are required to provide equal protection under the law to all people within its jurisdiction. The language of the 14th Amendment has been used in the past to fight cases of segregation and sexual discrimination. Without affirmative action, minorities may feel inferior and may be looked upon as inferior because there is always the question of whether or not they can make it on their own. It is also a possibility that some beneficiaries of affirmative action may continue to cling to their status as a victim because of the special treatment they receive. America's change in attitude towards affirmative action can be partially attributed to the rise in position of blacks in society. Since the 1960s, the percentage of affluent African Americans has more than doubled. When you give preferential treatment to minorities in admission or hiring practices, you're in effect saying, quote, "You're too stupid or incapable of achieving on your own, so let me help you." It is condescending and insulting to imply that minorities cannot achieve their goals through hard work and ability. Lowering standards? Is this what affirmative action was intended to do? Case in point. In 2009, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of 20 Connecticut firefighters who were in line for promotion, stating that they had been subjected to reverse discrimination after test scores of 77 total applicants were thrown out by the city of New Haven, when it was determined that not a single African American applicant had qualified for promotion through testing scores. Regardless of race, should these firefighters who scored within the promotion range have been the only candidates considered for advancement? We believe so. The City of New Haven's actions were a blatant example of reverse discrimination that can be hidden under the disguise of affirmative action. Despite good intentions, affirmative action is pernicious. Requiring government to discriminate on the basis of color penalizes alike both racists and the innocent, and rewards alike both those harmed by racism and those who have flourished. Government's task of justice requires instead that it focus on actual circumstances and not racial stereotypes. The law should be colorblind, to be sure, but that doesn't mean government may turn a blind eye to the plight of racism's victims. Government's main role is structural and supportive, facilitating the healthy development of social institutions. For it is in place outside of government that we must learn to love all of our neighbors, discover our talents, enjoy and begin families, churches, and associations, and find and create opportunities to serve others and thereby ourselves. But if government's action must be supportive, it is not any less crucial.
In 2003, 500 adults nationwide were asked, should universities use race as one of the factors for admissions? The results were 26% in favor, 65% in opposition, and 9% unsure. In another national survey, this one performed by Harris International for publication in the Journal of American Demographics, it was found that 77% of whites and 64% of Hispanics oppose affirmative action because they believe it dictates racial quotas. 80% of whites and 71% of Hispanics are against the special preferences given by affirmative action. 84% of blacks think that affirmative action is still necessary. Government has a positive task to combat injustice. At a minimum, it should require of itself and of society that race not be used as an excuse for hiring or admissions assessment. It must go beyond enforcing formal equal treatment. Government should actively work for a society in which everyone has a chance to flourish, regardless of sex, race, or economical background. To improve the educational advancement of minority students, government shouldn't force schools to disregard their best judgments concerning test scores and entrance examinations. In a time where the United States has seen its first African American president, it is imperative to remove affirmative action laws as to create a truly colorblind nation, where an individual is admitted or hired based entirely on merit. And this has concluded our case against affirmative action.